Revelation 13. The beast from the sea, the beast from the earth, and the number of his name. The beast rising from the sea. The dragon took his stand on the sand of the sea. He had failed to devour the child and failed to drown the woman, and now he turned to the work he could still do. He summoned a power up out of the deep to fight in his place. John watched the water, and something began to rise. It came up out of the sea, a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. And on the horns were 10 diadems, and across the heads were written names of blasphemy. It had the body of a leopard, the feet of a bear, the mouth of a lion. Anyone who knew the prophet Daniel felt the floor shift here, because Daniel had seen 4 beasts come up out of the sea, a lion, a bear, a leopard, and a 4th too terrible to name. And they were 4 kingdoms rising one after another. John sees them fused into one body. The empires of the past have not gone away. They have gathered into a single creature, and it is breathing. The sea itself is part of the message. In the Hebrew imagination, the sea was the realm of chaos, and the nations the churning Gentile mass out of which tyrants came. A beast from the sea is a Gentile power, an empire of the nations. And the dragon gave it everything: his power, his throne, and great authority. What John is being shown is not a private demon, but a government, an imperial system standing behind the persecution the churches were already feeling. To a reader in Asia under Rome, the leopard, bear, lion with Daniel's pedigree and Caesar's reach did not require a decoder. They knew whose ships were in the harbor and whose image was on the coin in their hand. The wound that was healed. One of the heads looked as though it had been slain, struck down to death. The Greek says the head had a wound of death. He plege tu thanatou, a death stroke. And yet the death stroke had been healed. The whole earth marveled and followed after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon who had given it authority, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who is able to make war against it?" A note on the wound. The healed death stroke had a sharp meaning for first-century readers that later readers lost. After Nero's suicide in AD 68, the empire convulsed through the year of 4 emperors, and it genuinely looked as though Rome itself might die with its dynasty. It did not. It recovered under the Flavians. There was also a widespread expectation, called Nero Redivivus, that Nero himself would return from the dead, or from the east, at the head of an army. The text plays on both: a head wounded to death, the empire reeling, and then the wound healed, the beast standing again to the world's astonishment. The point is not to identify a future political assassination, but to capture a real moment when the great enemy seemed finished, and then was not. Authority for 42 months. A mouth was given to the beast, speaking great things and blasphemies, and authority was given to act for 42 months. Notice the passive voice, repeated like a drumbeat through this section. A mouth was given, authority was given. The beast is loud and seems unstoppable, yet at every turn the text says it was given what it has. Its leash is in another hand. 42 months is 3.5 years, the broken half of 7. The standard biblical measure of a season of trial that is real but bounded. It is the same span as the trampling of the holy city and the 2 witnesses. This is judgment with a clock on it, not a permanent reign. And it opened its mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. It was given to make war on the saints and to conquer them. Here the text is brutally honest. The beast wins the visible battle. It kills the faithful. Authority was given it over every tribe and people and tongue and nation, and all who dwell on the earth worshipped it, everyone whose name was not written in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain from the foundation of the world. Then comes the hinge of the whole chapter, the line that tells the reader how to survive it. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, into captivity he goes. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he is to be killed. And John names the response God asks for. Here is the endurance and the faith of the saints. Not a sword, not a revolt. Endurance. Hypomone. The steady remaining under pressure that does not break. And pistis. Faith. Holding fast to the Lamb while the beast holds the visible power. The beast can conquer the body. It is told plainly that it cannot touch the name written in the book. That is the war the saints are actually fighting, and it is the one they win. The second beast, rising from the earth. Then John saw another beast coming out, this one out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. The disguise is the danger. It wears the appearance of something gentle, 2 little lamb's horns, and the moment it speaks, the dragon's voice comes out. The first beast ruled by force. This second beast rules by persuasion, by spectacle, by religion. It does not replace the first beast, it serves it. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and it makes the earth and those who dwell in it worship the first beast, the one whose death stroke had been healed. A note on the second beast. Readers ask what this earth beast is, and the honest answer is that the text describes a function before it names an institution. Its whole job is to make people worship the first beast. In the first century setting, that work belonged to the machinery of the imperial cult, the local priesthoods, magistrates, and provincial councils across Asia that built the temples to the emperor, staged the worship, and enforced participation. Later in Revelation, this same figure is called the false prophet. The label that matters is the one the text gives by its actions. It is the propaganda and religious enforcement arm that turns raw imperial power into something people will fall down and adore. You do not need to settle on a single named office to see clearly what it does. Fire, image, and the breath of life. It performed great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. This is mimicry. Calling fire from heaven was the sign of the true prophet, of Elijah on Carmel. The earth beast counterfeits it to win the crowd. By the signs it was permitted to perform, it deceived those who dwell on the earth, and it told them to make an image, an icon, to the beast that had been wounded by the sword and lived. Then it was given power to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image could even speak, and to cause all who would not worship the image to be killed. A statue that breathes and speaks and kills. This is the dark parody running underneath the whole chapter. God breathes life into what he loves. The beast system animates an idol and uses it to demand death. The worship of the empire was not an abstraction in Asia. It came with statues in every city, incense you were expected to offer, and real consequences for those who would not. The mark and the number of his name. And it causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free and the slave, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. The reach is total by design. Every social class, named in pairs, no one left outside the system. The pressure is economic before it is anything else. Refuse the mark and you cannot trade, cannot earn, cannot eat. It is a quiet, grinding coercion. Worship the beast or be slowly squeezed out of ordinary life. A note on buying and selling. This is the place readers most often reach for a future technology, a microchip or a scannable code without which no one can shop. The first-century world supplies something more concrete, and being precise about it guards against speculation. There was no empire-wide permit checked at the market gate in John's day. The famous certificates of sacrifice, the libelli, in which a person attested before witnesses that he had offered to the gods and the emperor, are real and survive in number, but they belong to the persecution under Decius around 250, nearly 2 centuries after John wrote. To read that formal system back into Revelation is to mistake a later codifying of the pressure for the pressure itself. What the churches of Asia actually faced was subtler and just as effective. Ordinary commerce ran through the trade guilds, the associations of silversmiths, butchers, dyers, dock workers, and the rest, and each guild met for banquets in honor of its patron god, with homage to the divine emperor folded in. Membership was the price of doing business, and the worship was the price of membership. A believer who would not offer the incense was not usually dragged off. He was frozen out, denied the guild, denied contracts, marked as disloyal, and quietly starved of trade. That is buying and selling gated by worship, enforced by social and economic squeeze rather than by a stamp on the skin. The same note continued. 2 episodes from the reader's own world show the muscle behind this. At Ephesus, the Guild of the Silversmiths, whose trade in shrines of Artemis the gospel threatened, raised the city against Paul and drove him out. The Book of Acts records it. And a generation later, in nearby Bithynia, the governor Pliny described to the emperor Trajan exactly how the loyalty test worked. Those accused of being Christians were cleared if they would invoke the gods, curse Christ, and, in his words, offer prayer with incense and wine to the emperor's image, which he had ordered brought in for the purpose. Pliny adds that the local trade in sacrificial meat had collapsed because so many had stopped buying it, and was reviving now that he was forcing the issue. There it is in a Roman official's own report. Worship of the image, the refusal of the faithful, and the economy bent to enforce conformity. John was not predicting a gadget. He was unveiling, in the language of mark and image and number, a system his readers already lived inside, in which the right to buy and sell ran through the worship of the beast. The mark on the hand and the forehead is not a new image. Israel was told to bind the law on the hand and between the eyes, the sign of who owned them and whom they served. The beast issues its own countersign, a parody of belonging, the hand that acts and the forehead that thinks, both stamped with the name of the beast, exactly as the servants of the Lamb are sealed on their foreheads with his name. The whole world is being divided by which name it bears. Then John sets a puzzle, and he tells the reader plainly that it can be solved. Here is wisdom. Let the one who has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. A note on 666. John says the number is arithmos anthropou, the number of a man, and then invites a calculation. In the ancient world, letters doubled as numbers, so every name carried a numeric value. This practice was called gematria. The oldest and best attested solution is the simplest. The Hebrew letters spelling Nero Caesar, Neron Caesar, add up to 666. There is strong supporting evidence inside the manuscript tradition itself. A number of early copies read 616 rather than 666, And 616 is exactly what you get from the Latin form of the name, Nero Caesar, which drops the final Hebrew letter worth 50. A scribe working from the Latin spelling would arrive at 616 honestly. That a variant exists, and that the variant lands on the same man by a different spelling, is the strongest internal confirmation that a specific name was always meant. The number is not a barcode or a future technology. It is a name, deliberately veiled so that those inside the churches could read it, while the authorities could not. And the name the evidence keeps returning to is Nero. This matters for how the chapter is read as a whole. The beast is an empire, and at its head in John's own day stood a particular emperor who had made war on the saints, the first to turn the power of Rome against the followers of the Lamb. The 42 months, the war on the saints, the healed wound, the demand for worship, the economic strangling, the veiled name, all of it is anchored in a real persecution under a real power that the first readers could name and were learning to endure. That is the point of the whole vision, not to frighten later generations with riddles, but to tell the saints who were in it that the beast had a leash, a limit, and a number, and that their endurance and their faith were the victory.